Station 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 20 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Last week there was this story, actually from Christmas until around last week, right? The story about this ship that was stuck in the ice off of Antarctica. And you looked at those pictures and you said, boy, it is cold out there. The rest of the country was cold. And now here, even in Florida, we're looking at some cold temperatures tonight. So it's a good time to talk about a cold place, Antarctica. And this is a discussion about the British explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton, and there's a book about him and his survival back in 1914. The book is called Chasing Shackleton, Recreating the World's Greatest Journey of Survival, and this happens to coincide with a 3-part PBS documentary, by the way, that celebrates remembers, I guess is a better word, the 100th anniversary of Shackleton's original expedition. I think he was believed to be dead, if I remember what I saw correctly. Tim Jarvis is the expert on this subject. He is one of the world's leading explorers, holding the record for the fastest unsupported journey to the South Pole and the longest unsupported journey to Antarctica. He's also a filmmaker, and the book, again, is called Chasing Shackleton. Good morning, Tim Jarvis. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, how are you?
Good. Where are you right now?
I'm in the UK. We're getting your weather, hopefully not getting your weather, just after you get it.
Oh, really? It's making its way. Well, yeah. What are they calling it? They're calling it a polar blast or a polar
the Arctic blast
vortex or something, right?
Oh yeah,
Arctic vortex or something.
the polar vortex.
And apparently, it happens on both poles. So, but you're no stranger to this. I mean, you've been in. What made you want to go down? Were you searching for evidence to write a documentary or produce a documentary on Ernest Shackleton?
No, look, he's always just been a hero of mine, and I've done expeditions over about 20 years, and his granddaughter actually asked me if I'd assemble a team.
Oh, really?
To attempt this journey, and I found myself saying yes, and don't regret it for a moment.
Oh, that's an honor. So she knew to go to you because you could pull it off.
Essentially, yeah, that's right. I'm no sailor, and this is a journey in a 23-foot keelless rowboat across the Southern Ocean, followed by a climb through the mountains. She knew.
Wow.
A rowboat.
Necessarily.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Right. Well, Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, was crushed in the pack ice before he ever made landfall on Antarctica. He had intended to land and then cross the continent on foot. And his ship was crushed, and the rest of their expedition was all about heading north rather than south in a small boat rather than on foot.
Oh, wow.
In a bid to save themselves.
So were you following in his footsteps more or less in order to retrace what he did?
Yes, we went as close as we possibly could. Obviously, in the ocean, you don't know exactly how it's going to go. We traditionally navigated. We had the same replica little rowboat. We had no keel on that boat. We had rocks for ballast in the bottom to stop it capsizing. We wore the same clothing, ate the same food, and used the sextant to navigate by. So to the extent that you can follow in someone's wake, we tried to do so. And then when we got to the mountains, we followed exactly the route he took according to his diary. And, and it was an incredible thing seeing all of the drama that he had been through for real for ourselves with no equipment. I mean, it was very, very challenging.
Wow. And do you have enough information to know how he survived? Because he was thought to be dead, right?
That's right. I mean, I think with the exception of Shackleton, actually, those guys from 100 years ago weren't very good about talking about their emotions and things like that, but they were very good about itemizing the equipment they had and, the temperature and where the wind was coming from and the route they took. So, in fact, the diary was quite accurate in terms of being able to follow it and copy the equipment that he had to do things exactly as he had done it. And so we're extremely confident that we went down the same steep, icy slopes as he did, and of course we landed at exactly the same place as he did with some difficulty, but we managed it. And it was a real thrill seeing the places for real, having read about them in his famous book.
Oh, wow. And do some of those places include surprises? Like, what was I watching something, and it showed like a green area, and the water was a lake. It was not frozen. It almost looked like a contradiction to what Antarctica is normally thought of as.
Well, that's right. I mean, the thing about this journey is we left Antarctica and we headed north to the sub-Antarctic, even though that still is extremely cold. But with warming that's happened in the last 50, 60 years or so, you do get some melting, and you do get a little bit of vegetation showing through now. It's like the temperatures are still extremely cold, the many degrees below freezing, and the wind is the winds are terrible. We had 85 knots of wind, which is about 110 miles an hour of wind. Could barely stand up much.
Wow.
But there are some areas where there's no ice. That's absolutely right.
Now, how did the cameraman withstand all of that treacherousness and everything? Because they must be climbers, but they probably aren't adventurers like yourself, and they had to worry about their equipment filming for the documentary.
Well, it's interesting you say that, but in our small boat, what we did was we had 6 cameras that filmed continuously that were automatic, that went to a bank of batteries that powered them, that were part of our ballast in the bottom of the boat. So whereas Shackleton had 1,000 kilograms, so a metric ton of rocks, we had about half a ton of rocks and half a ton of camera batteries. We figured it didn't give us any kind of advantage over him. It was just dead weight. But we didn't have a cameraman as such. We had cameras that just filmed 24/7 during the course of the trip. And then when we got to the mountains, a motor yacht, steel-hulled motor yacht, rendezvoused with us there and brought in 2 Discovery Channel cameramen who filmed the show for PBS and Discovery. And unfortunately, they didn't like the look of the conditions, and they decided they weren't going to do it. And so we did it ourselves without any cameraman, and we just filmed ourselves. So there was no cameraman behind the camera, if you like, for the whole.
Wow.
And how many people were with you?
There were 6 of us on the little boat, just like with Shackleton, and that's a distinct disadvantage because you're living in a space about the size of a queen-size double bed, except you're all
wow.
and cold on
My
the bed.
goodness.
Yeah, it was very challenging.
Did
very challenging conditions.
Did you face some life-threatening moments?
Yes. We narrowly missed an iceberg out at sea at night. We had a bad storm that lasted 48 hours, and bear in mind you're in a boat that when you step onto it from shore, the whole thing rocks crazily to one side. It's like trying to get onto a sailboard.
Oh my goodness!
Very, very unstable. The only thing that kept it even remotely stable was the weight of the rocks and the batteries and us, and constant vigilance to make sure that when you're kind of going down a 40-foot wave, you keep the nose pointing straight down, and you don't allow the boat to go sideways, or you will be rolled. And if that happens, someone will die because they'll end up in this very, very cold water, and you have no means of pulling them back on board in such a rough sea state. So, yeah, there were plenty of instances where I'd say 3 or 4 key instances during the course of the trip where I really thought, this could be it.
Yeah, wow. So when Shackleton's, if I understand right, his ship broke up at one point. How did you recreate that, or how did you do that part of the retracing?
Well, the answer is we didn't. So he went down on a big expedition ship called Endurance. Not that dissimilar in size to the boat that was being stuck in the ice down in Antarctica recently. And
okay,
this boat was wood, of course, and even though it was very strong, it was finally crushed by the pack ice and it sank. And he and his 27 men abandoned ship into the 3 small rowboats. These are the lifeboats from the main ship. And they managed to reach land, and 22 of the men were left in Antarctica, huddled under 2 of the upturned boats. And Shackleton took the 5 strongest men, got in the most seaworthy of the 3 rowboats, and went on this incredible 800 nautical mile journey across the Southern Ocean in a bid to reach another island, get to a whaling station, raise the alarm, and try and effect a rescue. So that's the journey that we did, the one in the small boat.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
The ocean, followed by the climb across the mountains.
And it said that for 3 years there wasn't any word from the expedition. That must have been normal at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these expeditions really, if you went down south, I mean, unlike the ship that's been stuck just recently who went maybe a bit early in the season. What tends to happen is you go down when you think the ocean is going to be relatively free of ice, which is in the southern hemisphere summer, and you make landfall on Antarctica if you're lucky. You may put out some provisions in the direction you want to travel the following summer, and then you sit out the winter. Following summer, you do your expedition. If you're lucky, you finish, get back to the hut in time to get on the ship and leave. If not, you have to stay a third season. So often those expeditions used to last maybe 2 or 3 years.
Wow. Is it hard to determine when you're on land as opposed to just ice that's got water under it?
That is a very, very good question because, Antarctica, the average thickness of ice is over a mile, and the place is twice the size of the lower 48. So you've got it's a vast continent with a vast amount of ice. 97% of the world's water is in the ocean, and of the remaining 3%, 2% is actually in the Antarctic ice cap.
Oh, wow.
So it's very difficult to know which bits are underlain by kind of solid rock and which bits are just very, very thick ice. Back when these guys were doing their expeditions 100 years ago, they didn't know. Now with seismic survey equipment, we can actually see where the kind of land starts and stops. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't know where the land stopped and started.
And is that important? Or because it's a mile thick, is it just as safe as if you were over land?
It is, except for the fact that the ice, of course, cracks and moves, and you end up with these crevices, and they can be many hundreds of feet deep.
Oh.
Sometimes deeper than that.
Oh, wow.
When you have ice that's a mile thick, it only takes a very small kind of wrinkling on the surface, if you like, and you have a crevice which is 120, 150, 200 feet deep, and you don't want to be falling into those. You wouldn't come.
Tim Jarvis is our guest. His book is called Chasing Shackleton. There's also a 3-part PBS documentary about this called because of the 100th anniversary of Shackleton's original expedition. When can we see the PBS documentary?
I think it's starting in 2 days' time. What are we now, the 7th? It starts tomorrow night, actually, 8th.
Oh, wonderful. January 8th.
Yeah. Okay, 2 days.
Yeah, and I think viewers will really feel as though they're in the boat with us. And the interesting thing about Shackleton's original is that the cameraman for his expedition, who took the photographs and that sort of thing, was left behind on the island, and Shackleton didn't take him with him.
Oh.
So he went five of the strongest sailors. So this is really the first time this journey is actually being captured on film.
And did you use the same sort of navigational equipment that they had? Or did they have any?
Yeah, they had a compass, a chronometer, which is a clock where the pendulum in the clock is allowed to kind of remain true because the whole thing sits on a sort of gimbal. In other words, the boat can move below it, but hopefully the pendulum still runs smoothly, which allows the clock to keep decent time. And the clock is very important for part of your calculations as to where you are. And then the rest of it is just all about using a sextant to measure the angle to the sun and working out where you are using the old traditional technique. That's what we did. But it relies on seeing the sun, which we only saw twice in the whole journey. Exactly the same, funnily enough, as Shackleton on the original.
Oh, wow.
Now, this is not the first explorer whose steps you've traced, right? You did it once before with Sir Douglas Mawson?
That's absolutely right. I did a journey. Mawson undertook an expedition. He was a contemporary of Shackleton and Scott's, and he was from Australia, and he was the sole survivor of an expedition where both the other men died. First fell in a crevice and was gone, and the second one died in his arms of malnutrition and hypothermia and frostbite and that sort of thing. And Mawson was the sole survivor, and ever since that original, many people had suggested that Mawson may needed to have eaten the second man to have made it. So I decided to attempt it with exactly the same equipment as Mawson, same time of year, same in Antarctica again, and just see whether it could be done with the food that he said he had without eating anyone.
How did you decide which men to take on this expedition with you?
Well, there needed to be somebody crazy enough to want to go through, and or be eaten, whichever came first,
Oh, my goodness.
I found a Russian He was considering whether or not to become involved. And when I told him he had to die dramatically halfway through, he said, "I'm in."
Oh, that's too funny. That's too funny.
And so, this sense of fate, you know.
And so, does the documentary capture the spirit that you just kind of let us know about? In other words, the human element of this whole story?
Very much so. You see arguments and you know, you see genuine danger. This is real TV rather than reality TV, and it was you know, you really just see what happened to us on this expedition.
Oh wow! I can't wait to see it.
Glory, with a bit of humor and anecdote and a lot of adventure.
Is PBS or anybody offering it as a download? Do I have to wait for it to be broadcast? Okay, or can I download it?
I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure they're bringing out a DVD, but I think
okay.
I think have a look online, but I would suggest tomorrow night. You might have to wait till tomorrow night. I do survive, I can tell you that much.
Thank goodness, yeah, thank goodness. Otherwise, it wouldn't be real TV, right?
Sleep easy.
Did his grandchildren want to go with you?
No. His granddaughter said, "Look, forget. You know, I don't want to go, but I would like you to do it." And she has two sons who are in their early 30s, actually. So she's, you know, the next generation up from me. But she said, you know, that they were quite happy for me to do it, and I think I'm almost like a kind of surrogate for her. And she said, you know, you go and do it and let me know how it goes. We did actually.
So, just a real quick.
Met her at his grave at the end, you know, because he actually, many years later, he died back down in South Georgia, funnily enough, which was the scene, of course, of this incredible victory, if you like.
On that same island. Wow.
Yeah, same island. Went back down, and he died of a heart attack the night he arrived, 6 years later. And he was buried down there.
So, real quick question about the ship that was stuck Christmas Day and for a week or so. Did you, in your expertise and your understanding of the area, did you see that they made a mistake? Is that how they ended up getting stuck, or could that have happened to anybody?
Well, look, to be perfectly honest with you, if you really want to go down and do a program with science that requires you being there for a big window of time, you need as much of the summer as you can. And summer for them, of course, is the opposite of summer for us.
Yeah.
So it's Christmas time through to maybe mid-February. After that time, the ocean can become frozen at any time. The determining factor is not really the temperature. It's really the direction in which the wind blows. If the wind blows onshore from the ocean, then all the icebergs that would otherwise be spread across a vast expanse of ocean end up banked up against Antarctica in a kind of, you know, layer 30, 40 miles thick. And that's what they're stuck in. It's because the wind is blowing onshore as much as the temperature. So I guess, look, you can get advanced weather to work out whether or not it's likely to be doing that or not. And maybe you could anticipate it. But I guess there are commercial realities to do with that trip, that the science is being supported by tourism on board, and you know, people want to see Antarctica.
Gotcha, right, yeah. And
maybe they pushed further south than they should have done.
That could be. Tim, I know you've got a lot of interviews to do this morning. Thank you for taking time to be with us on our show. Tim Jarvis, again, is our guest. Chasing Shackleton is the name of the book, and the PBS documentary, which starts, I believe it's on the 8th, right?
That's right, yep.
On the 8th. And the book goes on sale tomorrow, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I'm, you know, if I can say so, I'm proud of it. I think it's a great book. Lots of images, lots of good information, and again, hopefully you'll as the reader, you'll find yourself there in the boat with us, up in the mountains with us. I think it tells the story well, if I can say that.
Tim, thank you so much for being on with us. Real quickly, what website would be a website that you would recommend for our listeners?
ShackletonEpic.com.
Okay, easy enough. ShackletonEpic.com. Tim Jarvis, it's an honor to be able to say you were on our show. Thank you so much. If you go back down there, be careful.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Good luck with everything, and definitely come back whenever you want.
Will do.
Thank you. All right, we will take a little break, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to WOCA News Talk 1370, Ocala's source for what's happening in today's hottest, up-to-date news and topics.
You've got
got a garden and we've got a show for you called You've Got a Garden with your host, Master Gardener Carol Ann Baldwin. Carol Ann answers your questions about your flowers, your veggies, your grass, your trees, even questions about your bugs. And she's only on WOCA